Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a morning update. Leon Black is back in the news. He had a phone call today, an earnings call, and once again, he is explaining himself to the investors. This man, Leon Black, who has never ever had to explain himself ever in his life, is now on his heels as more and more comes out about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, all of these people have the same exact story, the same exact excuse every time they're asked. Well, I had no idea that Jeffrey Epstein was such an evil person. I didn't know he was doing what he was doing. And meanwhile, the facts just don't add up. These people who are using the marathon defense, as I like to call it, which usually turns into an all-out sprint like we're seeing before our eyes right now with Leon Black. All of these people using this excuse, in my opinion, are hiding something. Their ties to Jeffrey Epstein are a lot more serious than they're letting on. Because if they weren't, they would just be upfront about it. And they would come out and say, hey, look, here's the deal. I met Epstein at such and such a spot. We never did any business together. We weren't friends. I've never been to his house, blah, blah, blah. And anyone who says they have evidence of that shit, they're lying. But no, you don't see that. Instead, what you see these people do is ignore it, duck it, dodge it, like these survivors don't matter, like their story doesn't matter. These people don't know if they have a little bit of information, a small nugget that might help connect the dots for the investigators. They have no idea what they saw. They can say, oh, well, I didn't see anything. I didn't know the girls were underage. They all looked to be of age. They don't know. What if they saw a lineup with a bunch of girls in it and they were told to pick out the girls they saw with Epstein? How many of them would be underage? Again, we don't know because they don't want to talk. And therein lies the rub. That is why this case makes me so agitated and why I have been so adamant about these idiots being held to account. For their whole lives, they've been able to not answer questions. They've been able to do whatever they want. They've operated in a different tier of the justice system than the rest of us. And frankly, I'm tired of it. And this case has just brought it all to a head for me. As you all know, I first started researching this case because of government corruption, because of the corruption within the FBI that I had seen with my own eyes. And I knew once I started looking into this case and I saw how much evidence was there that the same shit was going on here. So I have no love for the FBI and the way they conduct themselves, the higher-ups. And I think that the whole entire thing, the whole entire so-called polite society is corrupted. They're corrupted by money, they're corrupted by power, they're corrupted by greed, and most importantly, I think they're corrupted by narcissism. And Leon Black most certainly fits into that category. Our article today is from ABC News, and the headline, Billionaire Leon Black addresses relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Horrible mistake. Talk about the understatement of the century, huh? Yeah, pretty sure that your decision to hang out with a convicted sex offender, Jeffrey Epstein, even after he was convicted, pretty sure that goes down as a horrible mistake, sir. And at the very least, you're feeling some of that heat now, at least socially. Because I'm not going to sit here and say that Leon Black was involved in abusing any of these girls. There's no evidence of that. I'm certainly not saying that. What I'm saying is, at the very least, he was an enabler. At the very least, he let Jeffrey Epstein use him as a conduit to reach different circles, different levels in so-called polite society. And all the while, he knew that Jeffrey Epstein was a convicted sex offender. That enough right there? I mean, that right there is enough for me as an investor, if I was investing with one of these sorts of companies, to not invest with Leon Black. If he's showing such poor judgment in that regard, how can I trust him to safeguard my money? This article was authored by James Hill. Billionaire investor Leon Black addressed his prior relationship with sex offender Jeffrey Epstein during an earnings call Thursday morning for Apollo Global Management, which has $433 billion, that's B for billion, of assets under management. Black is the founder, chairman, and CEO of Apollo. So basically, $433 billion of assets under management makes them huge, one of the biggest players in the game. And up until this point, there's no doubt they turned huge rewards. They were ripping and slipping and making all kinds of money for their investors at a huge clip. But with this cloud hanging over their founder, their CEO, Mr. Apollo himself, Leon Black, it is really starting to whack them in the pocketbook, folks. And when you start cracking these people in the pocketbook, that is when you get their attention. And we're seeing that now by the way Leon Black is all of a sudden addressing all of this shit. For all the years leading up to this, not a word. When Jeffrey Epstein was first arrested the second time around, he didn't come out right away and say, hey, I had a relationship with Epstein. I might know something, man. Who do I talk to? None of these people have done that. None of these people have done the so-called honorable thing that the Joe Exotic of the Windsor family is always whinging about. Not one of these people. You have Chef Adam Lang, who was compelled to speak basically after Virginia and Tara Palmieri chased him down. But besides that, who is coming forward? Who's stepping up to the plate? Which one of you clowns out there is going to step up to the plate and do the right thing? Who's going to speak to the authorities? There's no more avoiding this. This is not going away. And people like Leon Black are learning that right now in front of our eyes in real time. On the earnings call, Black called his relationship with Epstein a horrible mistake. Again, we're going to let that slide, a horrible mistake. It most certainly is a horrible mistake, but that's not going to cut it. You're going to have to come forward and talk on the record about some of the things you might have seen at Jeffrey Epstein's. I don't know what it is that you're so unwilling to speak about. You know, look, if you didn't do anything, and I don't have any evidence to say that you did, Mr. Black, and I'm not asserting that Mr. Black did anything as far as the abuse of girls, right? Because that would just be ridiculous. There's enough of that nonsense going around in this case where people just ought to, fire off at the lip about things that are just not based in reality. And I'm not going to get into that here on this podcast. But what I will say is that Mr. Black's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, the transfer of that money has to be looked at. And any other financial deals that they were involved in together also have to be looked at. Because even if Mr. Black doesn't know, that Jeffrey Epstein's dealing in dirty money, and he receives dirty money from Jeffrey Epstein, well, that now makes him part of the criminal conspiracy, folks. So, if it's good enough for you or me, well, it certainly should be good enough for these billionaires, right? By nature, I am a private person, and it runs counter to my nature to speak publicly about personal matters. Yeah, that ship sailed when you decided to hang out with Jeffrey Epstein. Black said in opening his remarks about Epstein, but this matter is now affecting Apollo, which my partners and I spent 30 years building. And again, imagine all of this extra attention and all of this nonsense that is falling on Leon Black and Apollo could have easily been avoided if he would have just stepped up to the plate right away, been a man, and addressed the situation head on. But no, it's a bunch of BS. Nobody's going to believe your nonsense. Oh, I had no idea that Jeffrey Epstein was really a sick pervert. I just thought that, he had this little slap on the wrist charge and because that was all he was charged with, Meanwhile, you're supposed to be one of the richest men in the world. So how can you amass such a fortune, be such a successful businessman, when you simply don't even vet somebody who is supposedly in charge of helping you out with financial decisions and other huge money decisions? But you don't vet this person? That's what you would want us to believe. You would have us believe that you didn't take the time to sit down and go through this guy's life with a fine-tooth comb, considering you've known him since 1996. I'm sure he's never said anything crass while you guys have sat at the table, huh? Please, give me a break. We all know that Jeffrey Epstein was always saying sick, disgusting, perverted shit. And it goes to reason that Leon Black was around when Jeffrey Epstein was piping off out of the side of his neck. And it's also causing deep pain for my family. Yeah, how do you think the survivors feel? How do you think their families feel? Again, I'm very hard-pressed to find empathy for any of Jeffrey Epstein's cohorts, for anybody who was around Epstein in any capacity as far as being this close. It's very hard for me to say, oh yeah, that's shitty that, your company's suffering and your family's feeling a bit embarrassed. And well, it does suck. Don't get me wrong. The sins of the father are not the sins of the child or the family. But at the same time, you should have done the right thing a long time ago. You should have come forward. You've known Jeffrey Epstein since 1996. You've been his friend. You stood by his side all the way through his conviction. And then you have the audacity to try and act like you have no idea who the man really is underneath the surface. It just doesn't add up, Mr. Black. Knowing all that I have learned in the past 2 years about Epstein's reprehensible and despicable conduct, I deeply regret having had any involvement with him. With the benefit of hindsight, working with him was a horrible mistake on my part. I am not seeking to excuse that decision, but I do believe it may be helpful to convey some relevant facts. Well, yeah, but you've had so much time to relay these facts. What new facts have emerged that you've all of a sudden remembered that you're going to share with the rest of us? It certainly doesn't seem like there are any new facts. It seems like you're just repackaging the old ones. Earlier this month, the New York Times reported in a deep dive on Black's dealings with Epstein that his relationship with Epstein went deeper than previously known and reportedly included at least $50 million in payments from Black to Epstein and a 2012 visit by Black to Epstein's private Caribbean island for a cookout. Didn't Jeff Staley happen to show up there for something similar? Sure does seem to be a lot of these bigwig banksters showing up on Jeffrey Epstein's island, huh? Who else was on that island? Mr. Black? How do you know that none of those girls that were on that island were underage? Mr. Black, are you an expert at reading people and knowing their age? Did you check everybody's IDs like the bouncer? How do you know, Mr. Black? Maybe somebody should give you a list of people, pictures of girls who were abused by Epstein, and maybe we should see if you ever saw any of them in your visits to Jeffrey Epstein's island or his other properties. The Times report, with the headline, "The Billionaire Who Stood by Jeffrey Epstein," has resulted in renewed scrutiny of Black's dealings with Epstein and has reportedly caused some institutional investors to reevaluate or pause their investments with Apollo, according to Bloomberg and other reports. We talked about that when it happened. 100% true. That is definitely occurring as we speak. People are running for the hills. They've had enough. These investors, especially the public pensions, like I talked about earlier, these people who are managing billions of dollars, the last thing they want to do is be involved with anyone who has the stink of a child predator hanging over them. Absolutely not good for business. Apollo released a statement last Wednesday saying it would launch an independent review of Black's ties with Epstein, Reuters reported. And we talked about that as well. They're bringing in a third party, an independent law firm, to take a look at what occurred. And I won't be holding my breath for the results. We've seen previously how these so-called third-party investigations go, and I'll be nice when I say they have not been pleasant. One Apollo investor, the Pennsylvania Public School Employees Retirement System, said it is closely following the ongoing legal issues and the newly launched internal Apollo investigation. In a statement last week, Reuters reported. Again, that's what I'm talking about when I say pensioners. These are people that have worked their whole lives in the public sector, and they have amassed, decent-sized pensions. And then they put these pensions with people like Leon Black to help them grow. And the last thing you want to do is get caught up in a scandal such as this, even if it means maybe a 0.25% less on your return with somebody else. It's worth it if you're not dealing with this kind of scandal. The existing Apollo commitments were made under the previous administration, and we have no plans to commit further capital to their funds at this time. We reviewed Apollo this spring and determined, based on a variety of due diligence criteria, they do not meet our standards for making a new capital commitment, said Gabrielle Farrell, Director of Communications for Connecticut State Treasurer Sean T. Wooden, in a statement to ABC News. Connecticut Retirement Plans and Trust Funds, an Apollo investor, consists of 6 state pension funds and 9 state trust funds. So we're talking about billions of dollars. That is going to go by the wayside here. The Connecticut Retirement Plans and Trust Funds, they're not having it. They're not going to commit any further capital. And the existing commitments were made under the old regime, meaning the people who are in charge now really have no desire to do business with Apollo going forward until there's resolution here. And the only proper resolution is going to be if Leon Black steps down. He's going to have to do what Glenn Dubin did and Les Wexner did if he wants to stem the bleeding. Black and some of his related family entities have also been subpoenaed for documents by the U.S. Virgin Islands Attorney General's Office, which is conducting a wide-ranging investigation of Epstein's financial dealings and his alleged sex trafficking scheme. There's some more information going on down in the Virgin Islands right now about subpoenas, and we're going to get to that later on in another episode. But there definitely is some movement down there that we're going to discuss that I was just taking a look at. Black said he had requested that the Apollo board initiate a review of his relationship with Epstein and said an independent conflicts committee is now working on gathering information. An independent conflicts committee. Sounds official, huh? Sounds real official. What does that even mean? Here's an idea. Why don't you let your investors pull together a couple of bucks and have them get somebody to investigate your dealings? Have the people who you're responsible to, as far as financially anyway, how about they initiate the investigation? Black said he hoped the review would be completed expeditiously and that he expects it will assure all of our stakeholders that they have the relevant facts and demonstrate that everything I have said about my relationship with Epstein is accurate and truthful. The review is now underway and I am fully cooperating. All right, well, maybe you should take a polygraph too. If I'm telling you, I'm not even kidding. Right? We're talking about billions of dollars here. We're going to let this guy shepherd our billions of dollars if we're part of these pension funds or if you're in charge of these pension funds with this sort of cloud hanging over him? I don't understand how you could do that or how you could expect those who hold those pensions to do that. Black reiterated that Epstein and his related companies never did any business with Apollo. but he acknowledged paying Epstein millions of dollars annually for a 6-year period between 2012 and 2017 for professional services to my family partnership and related family entities involving estate planning, tax structure of art entities, and philanthropic advice. So again, I don't mean to, beat a dead horse over here, but it has to be said once again. You needed Jeffrey Epstein to be involved in your estate planning, your tax, and your structuring of art entities, as well as your charitable work? What the hell did Jeffrey Epstein ever do to afford him such high esteem? Who else was he working with that we don't know about? Leon Black seems to infer that Jeffrey Epstein has been working with other esteemed type people using the, well, my friends did it excuse. So, how about you start, Mr. Black, by airing out some of these other people that Jeffrey Epstein supposedly worked with? Black said that all of Epstein's advice was vetted by leading law firms, accounting firms, and other professional advisors. Again, if you're going to have all of that shit vetted, right? All of that vetted, his advice. Doesn't it lead you to think that he would have the actual dude vetted as well? And know that he is not dealing with a guy that just had a minor conviction. None of this story adds up. And if I'm figuring it out, right, and I'm reading between the lines, and I'm hitting his story and chopping it up with a Ginsu knife, I'm certainly not some super successful business pensioner, okay? But I'm sure some of these other guys are hip to what's going on here, and I'm sure they're hip to the fact that Leon Black is really not doing himself any favors. Let me be clear, Black said. There has never been any allegation by anyone that I engaged in any wrongdoing because I did not. And any suggestion of blackmail or any other connection to Epstein's reprehensible conduct is categorically untrue. Well, I'm not saying that the guy did anything wrong, and I don't speak for anybody else, and nobody besides me and my bearded face speak for me either. So when I say I'm not saying he did anything involving the abuse of these girls or anything like that. That I'm only speaking for myself, but I have seen zero evidence of that. I'm more inclined to believe that if there is any wrongdoing on Mr. Black's part besides being socially reprehensible for having a relationship with Epstein and enabling Epstein, I think that the way to a path of discovery there would be obviously through their financial history together. And if the investigators get creative and they really start digging, I'm sure that they can find a few ties that bind. Black said that he first met Epstein in 1996, long before any allegations of Epstein's alleged sexual crimes became public, and he noted that Epstein was then advising prominent clients on estate matters and that his network of relationships included luminaries that Black admired and respected, including several heads of state, heads of prominent families in finance, a U.S. Treasury Secretary, accomplished business leaders, Nobel laureates, acclaimed academics, and noted philanthropists. So, again, this is what I just briefly touched on a second ago. Oh, well, all of these so-called members of polite society were hanging out with him, so it was okay for me to do it. I didn't have to vet him. Meanwhile, this is the biggest problem when we talk about enabling. People might ask, oh, well, what's the big deal if they were hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein? That doesn't make them complicit in his crimes. Well, that's true. It doesn't make them complicit in his crimes, but it does make them complicit in him being able to access that part of society and then use the influence that he bartered for to help him in committing those crimes. So while they might not be directly involved, the fact that they gave him credibility, the fact that they moved in the same circles with him and invited him to break bread with them was enough. Black said he first became aware of the allegations against Epstein in late 2006 when it was publicly reported that the state and federal authorities in Florida were investigating Epstein. He said that after Epstein got out of jail in 2009, Epstein returned to his previous financial advisory activities and once again began working and associating with many prominent individuals spanning the worlds of finance, academia, science, technology, philanthropy, business, and government. All right, so how about you go on record and give us some names? It's easy to just say all of these different levels of of society where Jeffrey Epstein was working with people, but how about we get some names, Mr. Black? Sure looks like you're just trying to get the spotlight off yourself, or you're trying to say to us, but they did it, so it's okay that I hung out with them too, isn't it? No, it's not okay that any of you hung out with him. It's not okay that any of you enabled him, and it's certainly not okay that any of you were involved in any sort of shisty financial dealings with them. The distinguished reputations of these individuals gave me misplaced comfort in retaining Epstein's services in 2012 for my personal estate planning, tax structuring, and philanthropic advice. So again, a man that is this rich, a man that's in control of all of your money out there, if you're listening to me, pensioners, all of your money that you work so hard for, a man that makes such terrible decisions, a man that even after Jeffrey Epstein was a convicted sex criminal, decided to bring him back in the fold as a personal estate planning advisor and an advisor in other areas. This is the kind of man that should be in charge of your money. This helps you sleep good at night knowing your money's parked with a man who was involved and had shown such bad judgment that they would be involved with Jeffrey Epstein even after his arrest. That's the sort of person that you're going to rely on to safeguard your money. I have to tell you what, folks, I don't think I'd let the guy pair my socks. Like many other people I respected, I decided to give Epstein a second chance. Names, buddy. All right, I'm tired of many people, this person, that person. We need names, or I'm calling you a liar. How about that? Until we get those names, in my opinion, Mr. Black, you're a liar. You and Wexner, those are a lot of people, huh? All right, sure. As of now, those are the only two people we know about. So until you go on record and you provide us some context and you provide us some names, well, I will consider you a liar, sir. This was a terrible mistake. I wish I could go back in time and change that decision, but I cannot. Yeah, you and Cher both, buddy, all right? But it's not going to happen. Had I known any of the facts about Epstein's sickening and repulsive conduct, which I learned in late 2018, more than a year after I stopped working with him, I never would have had anything to do with him. Such a BS artist. I mean, all right, look, again, I certainly don't speak for anyone out there in the audience. That's for sure. You folks are the sharpest, most intelligent listeners in the business. But for me personally, I have a hard time believing that. I have a hard time believing that a man like Leon Black, a man that is so powerful, a man with his own private security detail, I'm sure, didn't know the allegations swirling around Jeffrey Epstein, didn't know about the young girls in Palm Beach and the massages and all of the other heinous, disgusting shit that he was accused of. I do not believe Leon Black's story for 1 second. And according to some of these other people who are involved in the story here, some of the people that are investors with Apollo, well, they're not buying it either. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All of the links that go with this episode can be found in the description box. And to everybody who has donated to the PayPal, thank you very much. And remember, folks, today's the day. Around 6 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, episode 1 of the new podcast, Unsolved But Not Forgotten, will be uploaded for you to dive into and get your Halloween weekend kicked off correctly. All right, folks, enjoy your night tonight. Talk to you all in a little while.